Welcome back to another episode of Flick Connection, where I'm going to tell you about some of the best movies you can stream right now, movies you've probably never heard of. Today, we're talking about some high drama movies included with Prime Video. And the show would like to welcome back my beard. It's been a while. You got anything to say? No? Typical. Thanks to BetterHelp for sponsoring another video, but I want to start with my number 10 pick, which is kind of a throwback thriller from 2005 titled Derailed. This actually stars Clive Owen and Jennifer Aniston, and really one of the only thrillers she did like this. And it's kind of a sexy one too. The two of them are trying to have an affair when a crime takes place. I will say the movie does have some disturbing elements. It's got a bunch of great twists and turns. It's not a total banger, which is why it's my number 10 pick, but it does share quite a bit in common with the classic 90s sort of sexy thrillers like Fatal Attraction and Basic Instinct. And it's also worth noting that you can catch Derailed on Prime Video, like all the movies on this list, but it's also free to watch on Freevee and Tubi if you don't subscribe to Prime Video. So be sure to go check out that top pinned comment to find out where these movies are available to stream around the world, but also if it's been a while since I posted this video, maybe some of these are gone from Prime, you might have luck on some of those other streaming services, again, down in that top pinned comment. But speaking of 90s thrillers, I've got one of those great 90s thrillers that got discovered on DVD. It's titled Suicide Kings. Like I said, this is one of those movies that just didn't get the respect it deserved back when it released, but it found an audience when it released on DVD, and this one is a banger. It almost completely takes place in one room, or one house, basically. Christopher Walken plays a crime boss. A bunch of naive guys kidnap him to try to hold him ransom, and as you can imagine, things don't go very well. And it's a dialogue-heavy movie. I mean, Christopher Walken helps carry it, but you've got a bunch of great actors. Dennis Leary has kind of a side story here that's pretty great as well.
So you got fish boots?
I'm wearing stingray boots, man. These are one of a kind.
Fish boots?
I would imagine any fans of the gangster genre have seen this, but if it's somehow eluded you, this is one of the better picks on this list, again, if you've never seen it. And then even though my number 8 pick stars Nicole Kidman, I know a lot of people missed Destroyer. It's easily one of her least glamorous roles. She actually plays a pretty rough, hardened character in this. She's an undercover cop who's kind of living on both sides of the law, but she's still, like, very much a detective. It's kind of a wild story. There's a heist that takes place in it, and it all feels very grounded. This is actually from the director of a little-known movie titled The Invitation that I recommend on this channel all the time. While it's almost as solid of a production, it's not quite as mind-blowing of a movie as The Invitation, but it's also expertly directed, again, by a director that just doesn't get enough love. Now, if you've been on a Michael Keaton kick since Beetlejuice came out, you're gonna wanna check out my next pick where he plays a real bad guy, something he does not do often in his career. It's titled Desperate Measures. In this movie, Andy Garcia plays a cop whose son needs an organ transplant, and the only match that they can find is this hardened criminal played by Michael Keaton. And the movie ends up being kind of an escape movie. Michael Keaton's character is this really clever, shrewd criminal that's trying to escape from this hospital and avoid this organ transplant. Andy Garcia is obviously trying to catch him, not just to prevent a killer on the loose, but to save his son's life. It's got great elements to it. The only thing that holds it back is a PG-13 rating. With a slightly harder edge, this could have been a really memorable movie. As it stands, though, it's still a solid recommendation. Now, in addition to all the movies that I like to recommend here, I also like to recommend things that I've enjoyed or found beneficial in my life. Therapy has been one of those things, believe it or not. So I'd like to take a minute to tell you about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy affordable and accessible. Finding a good therapist can be expensive, but depending on where you live, it can be impossible to find a good therapist, but not with BetterHelp. And it could not be easier to get set up with BetterHelp. All you gotta do is answer a few basic questions, and with those answers, they're gonna pair you with a therapist that's right for you, and in most cases, they can do that within about the first 48 hours. And I did therapy remotely, just like you would with BetterHelp, and since doing that, I feel like I'm happier, healthier, I feel like I'm a better husband and a better father, just from talking to a qualified professional. And they're easy to work with. Not only is BetterHelp convenient and comfortable, but if you don't like the therapist they've paired you with, you can switch and you don't have to worry about insurance or who's in your network or any of that stuff. For a limited time, my viewers can follow the link down in the description or just type in betterhelp.com/flickconnection to get 10% off your first month. And you don't need to have chronic depression or crippling anxiety to benefit from talking to a therapist. I look at it as a personal growth tool. I feel like I understand myself better, I have better habits in my relationships, I have even better tools to help me solve problems when they come up, and all of that has led to a better sense of well-being day to day. It's great stuff. Again, to get 10% off your first month, just use my link down in the video description or go to betterhelp.com/flickconnection. But let's get back to the movies on this list. Next up, I've got the newest movie on this list. It came out just last year and I think went criminally underrated. Guy Ritchie's The Covenant. And it maybe went underrated because it doesn't look or feel much like a Guy Ritchie movie. This is a very different type of project from him. And the thing I really liked about The Covenant is not just that it's a good modern warfare production, it's that it's actually two stories that sort of piggyback on each other. Jake Gyllenhaal is great in this movie, but he actually gets rescued by his interpreter, and that's a big portion of the story, and that's great. And then when his interpreter gets, left behind, he has to go back in and try to save him. Now, while this is a work of fiction, it is based on reality. Things like this did happen, and it's kind of an amalgamation of different stories, so there's a lot of truth in The Covenant, even though overall it is a work of fiction. I would say whether you like Guy Ritchie's or not, this is a solid movie filled with stories, true stories from Afghanistan, making it just a fantastic movie. But don't expect an all-out action movie with this. While there is some shootouts and things, that's not really what it's about. It's more about that core story, and I think he did an expert job with this one. It just, again, doesn't quite feel like Guy Ritchie, which is probably why they put his name in the title. But we'll go from that relatively big budget movie to one that has like a micro budget. We're talking thousands of dollars, which is like nothing to make a movie, and it's kind of a mind-blowing sci-fi flick titled Coherence. Now, the micro budget in this movie will show. All this is a dinner party, and it's filmed very kind of haphazardly, which actually works to the benefit of this particular story. During this dinner party, old friends are discussing the fact that there is a comet flying overhead, a significant comet event, and then weird things start happening with their phone and the lights, and then really strange things start to happen. And this movie's done with little to no special effects at all, yet it works and it manages to be absolutely mind-blowing. This is one that has turned into a cult classic over the years. If you like Christopher Nolan level stuff that really kind of messes with your brain, Coherence is an excellent pick, especially if you can look past the facade of this, again, micro budget, which I can because it makes me respect it even more. Like, I love that they made this movie with almost no money. Now, my number 4 pick, I'm gonna assume, this is my guess, it's the movie that almost no one watching this video has heard of, even though it's got some fairly recognizable names in it. It's titled Rust and Bone. I'll also say this is foreign language, but as the title would suggest, this is a high drama movie. Marion Cotillard actually plays a whale trainer who suffers a horrific accident. She becomes paralyzed, and it's more about sort of the bond that she develops with this fella who is involved in crime. He actually does these brutal street fights, but the movie features just stunning cinematography, incredible performances, and even though the plot is fairly thin and it's really about the bond that these two people are developing, it ends up being an incredibly intense movie. The director here actually did another movie titled A Prophet that I think is one of the best prison movies I've ever seen. It's easily like in the top 5, and I know a lot of people have missed that one. I rarely see it available on streaming, so I never get to recommend it, but I wanted to take this opportunity to point it out. Rust and Bone, though, if you clicked on this video looking for a high drama movie that is just beautifully done, it's an incredible hidden gem. I should also point out that these movies will not be included with Prime Video forever, so make sure you've clicked the subscribe button, maybe even the bell icon, if you want to be notified as soon as these videos release. That way you don't miss the movies before they're gone. And then one with some huge names that I think just went criminally underrated and underappreciated is Flight, starring Denzel Washington. Now, this is a huge budget movie directed by Robert Zemeckis. And the marketing for this movie, I think, was all wrong. They really sold the plane crash element, almost like kind of a Sully story is I think what they tried to sell here, and that's not what this is. While a major event like that does take place, and even though it is directed very well and filmed well and it all plays out perfectly, that's not what this movie is about. The movie is 13 years old now, so I'm going to spoil a little bit for you. The movie's about his alcoholism, and what's so brilliant about Flight is it kind of sneaks up on you in the movie the way the realization kind of sneaks up on his character. You know, he doesn't really buy into the fact that he's an alcoholic from the beginning, even though we get whiffs of it. So the movie almost puts you in the position of someone with alcoholism where you're not really willing to accept it. It's actually kind of a nice little trick, and I think going into it knowing that is not necessarily going to spoil it at all. Even though there's this major plane crash in the movie, most of the drama comes from this realization that he's destroying his life. Oh, but my number 2 pick is not only an incredible movie with just an amazing look and soundtrack, it's kind of one of a kind, but it is also incredibly intense. It's titled The Devil's Double.
Do you know who this is? It is not who you think it is. My father cannot be everywhere at once. I want you to come and work for me. Work for you. I want you to be my double.
This is based on the true story of a man who became a double for one of Saddam Hussein's most sadistic sons. Dominic Cooper plays both characters. He does a brilliant job. They're both very different characters, and the story plays out a little bit like The Prince and the Pauper, except the prince in this case is a absolute animal. I mean, if you don't know much about Saddam Hussein's sons, check out this movie. It is incredibly disturbing stuff, but the movie itself is top-notch. It came out in 2011, but it's got this real feel of the 80s and 90s. I think they do take some liberties to make the story a bit more harrowing and a bit more Hollywood. Not too much, but they do step on the gas a little bit. And I think if they didn't, the movie would actually be maybe too upsetting to watch, because this, again, Saddam Hussein's son is a, I don't even want to say wild man. I mean, just an absolute animal. And most of the movie is spent with the double, who is essentially just trying to survive in the skin of this devil. Just an incredibly interesting setup, and the movie delivers. It really could not have been much better than it was. I highly recommend this one if you've never seen it. And then my number 1 pick is an absolute mind blower. Hopefully a lot of longtime subscribers have tapped into this movie by now, because I've been recommending it for years. You know, I maybe only recommend it once a year, but once a year, I like to recommend Moon.
Rock and roll, God bless America.
For those who have not seen it, Sam Rockwell is the sole inhabitant of a moon base. He's there to keep things running, and his only companion is a robot voiced by Kevin Spacey, of all people. And this is the first feature film from director Duncan Jones, who's actually the son of David Bowie, and it's still to this day his highest rated movie. And for the bulk of it, it plays out kind of like a movie like Castaway. You're dealing with this sole inhabitant of the moon who's just alone and trying to survive. He's trying to get by psychologically, living on his own, but about halfway through the movie, there is a major twist and it turns into something else entirely, and it's absolutely mind-blowing. Expertly directed. It's an incredibly well-crafted sci-fi movie that I highly recommend everyone watching this video check out. Hopefully you come away with some great recommendations here. Do not forget to go check out that BetterHelp link down in the description if you feel like you could benefit from talking to somebody. But I will keep making these videos as long as y'all keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this Prime Video episode, and you will see me on the next one.